All right, today we'll be adjusting valves on a 1997 Honda Foreman 400. This is the foot shift model. We've got your pull starter here, which is actually the back of the motor. And then we've got your cylinder head here. This is your cylinder head cover here. You do not have to pull this motor to adjust the valves. Just want to make that clear. Don't go pulling your motor just to adjust your valves. Just going to have a couple more obstacles here when adjusting valves, but it's really a simple project. So this, like I said, this recoil is going to be on the back of the motor. On the right hand side, it would be by your right heel, is a cap that looks like this, and it takes an Allen wrench to remove it. You want to go ahead and remove that cap, and just with an Allen wrench there, and then you're going to want to remove this pull starter here, and that takes 4 8mm bolts to remove that pull starter, and I've just loosened a couple of them just to help this video go a little bit quicker. Go ahead and remove it. You're going to have a recoil cup is what they call it underneath there, and I'll show you what this looks like at the end of the video so you have an idea. Next thing you're going to do is take a 10mm impact or a socket wrench, just loosen these up and pull this cover off here, and right here you'll have your rocker arms. Your push rods are down here, and then your valves are here. We've got your intake is actually in the back, your exhaust is in the front because your exhaust comes out here, your intake comes in here. They both, as you can see, have adjuster screws on them and then a lock nut, a 10mm lock nut. So you don't have to pull any of this loose to adjust the valves. What you're going to do next is grab a 17mm socket or a wrench. You're going to turn this clockwise. What you're doing is turning this crankshaft in there, and you're finding the top dead center compression. You'll see these push rods go up and down while you're doing this process, and if you know a little bit about motors, you can kind of watch these valves go up and down and tell basically where top dead center is. But then I like to watch these when they stop moving. Go ahead and start looking in your sight glass here, the sight window, the cap that you pulled off, and there'll be 2 lines. You want to line that up with the second line is the best spot. Anywhere in those, between those lines actually would work, but technically it's supposed to be the second line there. So you can be on that line and not be on top dead center compression. Your valves, what happens is your valves will be down, so there'll be pressure on these rockers, and you're not on the right stroke to adjust valves. So we found top dead center where we need to be, and we'll go ahead and adjust those valves. You're going to have, on this one, you're going to have 0.006 for the intake and the exhaust, and that's in inches, not millimeters. So grab your feeler gauges here. You'll see 0.004, 0.006. And what you can do then is take your feeler gauge, stick it underneath there. If it's loose, you can go up to the next 2 or 3 sizes and see if it fits under there. If it doesn't, just drop down. You want to get until it's the 6. So if it is loose, and both of these actually are going to be loose, what I do then is take my 10mm wrench, loosen this lock nut, and as you can see, it's spinning this adjuster screw, which is fine. We can just loosen that all the way up. I take my 6mm or my 0.006 inch feeler gauge here and tighten this down on top of it. Now you don't want it extremely tight. You want it some drag there, but you don't want to go too tight, or it won't be at the correct adjustment. So you want a little bit of drag there. We've got it there. Now what I do is I leave my feeler gauge in there. I tighten down my lock nut with my fingers there. Then I take my screwdriver, and I want to do this so you can see it here, but I take and hold this, set my screwdriver on, or my wrench on there, and tighten this down. A lot of times your adjusting nut or your adjusting screw is going to tighten up with it, but sometimes if you can hold your screwdriver just right, tighten that up, you'll be just fine. So now it didn't tighten up, and this is exactly how you want it to be, some drag. Now what you can do is take your next size feeler gauge and stick it in there to see if it fits, and it might be able to, well, this one won't even fit in there. So we are spot on. There we go. It'll fit in there, but it's way too tight. It shouldn't be that tight. Then you go ahead and do the exact same thing with the exhaust, and these are adjusted separately. So some models, I think in particular the sport models, are adjusted together, so you tighten one up and it loosens the other one and vice versa. So you gotta kind of work them together, but this one on the Foreman, you just do it individually. So same thing there, loosen it up, loosen up the lock nut, stick your feeler gauge in there, tighten it down on top of there until there's some drag. I've got too much drag right there. So back it off a little bit and tighten it up just a hair. All right, and then I'm going to leave that feeler gauge in there. and it's too tight again. This one's extremely touchy there. There we go. And then go ahead and tighten that lock nut down on there. And you've got a better angle there to see if it tightened down or not. And that is where it needs to be. Now, what I do, double check that it's on top dead center compression, make sure it didn't roll off there. We can double check them if we need to. And go ahead and put this back on. Make sure this gasket, this gasket here is good. Make sure there's no damage to it. Tighten this down, snug them up. I kind of do it in a crisscross pattern, that way it doesn't damage this gasket in any sort of way. Make sure your plug's back on there before you start your motor. You're going to start shooting oil out of there. And then put your recoil starter back on there. Sometimes what I'll do, get everything back together, I'll just spin around a couple times. Sometimes I'll even double check it if I'm not totally sure, but there really is no reason. If you're on top dead center, you adjust them where they need to be, you don't need to double check them. So that is adjusting valves on the Foreman 400. I'm going to show you what that mark looks like. I probably moved it off of the mark down there, but this is the inspection cap here, the sight glass window to line it up. And I'll take it off there and see if I moved it. It's going to be extremely hard to see, but very, very pretty small line on that flywheel is what it is. There's your pull starter there, and you take and spin this. Again, you want to spin it clockwise. That's the way your motor's going to turn. So that is adjusting valves on a Honda 400.